The night I couldn't breathe, the walls seemed to cave in with each shallow gasp. I reached for the phone, every joint aching, every breath scraping like sandpaper through my chest. I called Camille, my only child, my blood, my pride. It rang 5 times. Then voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I left a message. Not begging, just asking. Honey, I think I need help. I can't drive myself to the hospital. If you could come down from Seattle. My voice cracked, not from illness, but from something older, something lonelier. She never called back. 3 hours later, the front porch light flicked on. A knock came, soft but steady. It wasn't Camille, it was Marissa. She stood there in a thick green cardigan, holding a thermos and an overnight bag, her curly hair wet from the rain. She didn't ask permission. She didn't make a fuss. She just walked in and said, "You look pale. We need to go now." I didn't argue. In the ER, machines beeped and nurses moved around like they were choreographing a dance I wasn't invited to. I drifted in and out. Every time I opened my eyes, she was there. Marissa. Wiping my forehead, tucking a blanket, answering the doctor when I couldn't form words. I kept expecting her to leave. That first night, I whispered, "You don't have to stay. I'm sure you've got work." She shook her head. "I work remotely. I told Ethan I'm staying with you. He understands. Ethan, my son, my quiet boy who'd married this woman I never quite figured out. I never disliked her, but I never let her in either." She pulled a battered paperback from her bag. "You still love Louise Penny novels, right?" I blinked. How did she know that? "I saw them on your shelf, all dog-eared. You stop at chapter 6 a lot," she read. To me that night, her voice low and warm. I fell asleep before the second chapter ended. By morning, she had already brewed tea in the hospital kitchen and placed a sticky note on the bedside table. "They said your oxygen's improving. I'll be back after I shower. Left your lotion near the sink." A little heart drawn beside it. I stared at that note for a long time. That was the morning I realized. The person I raised had become a stranger. And the stranger I kept at arm's length? She had just moved her heart into the room, and she wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't always this quiet woman in a hospital bed, waiting for someone to remember I exist. Once, I ran a flower shop on the corner of 9th and Hemlock, Helena's Blooms, painted lavender with window boxes that overflowed each spring. I knew every anniversary in town. I wrapped each bouquet like it was a secret message. It was my pride, my identity. Until Camille got into Stanford. She called me, breathless. "Mom, I got in, MBA program, but I need help with the first year's tuition, just until I land on my feet." I sold the shop the following week. I remember boxing up the vases in silence, the smell of roses clinging to my clothes. I told myself it was worth it, that someday she'd look back and say, "Mom made it possible." She didn't. She never mentioned the sacrifice again. After Stanford came the internships, then the promotions, then the move to Seattle with Logan, her better half. I visited once. The doorman didn't know who I was. The guest room had no sheets on the bed. Camille apologized, said they weren't expecting me to stay. She called when it was convenient. Birthdays sometimes. More often, I'd get a text. "Work's a beast, but I love you, Mom. We'll call soon." She never did. When Ethan and Marissa married, I was still grieving the silence from Camille. Marissa was warm but careful, always polite, always offering help I never took. She sent me a Thanksgiving card that first year, even though Camille didn't. "Grateful for you," it said, written in loopy cursive with a tiny watercolor of our family dinner drawn in the corner. I kept it in my fridge for months. One winter, I slipped on ice and cracked 2 ribs. Camille texted, "Ugh, that's awful. I'm slammed with deadlines. Can Ethan check on you?" Ethan was in Texas that week. Marissa showed up that night, brought groceries, sat with me as I winced through each cough, washes the dishes while humming to herself. didn't post any of it online. She never made me feel like a burden, and yet, for years, I still defended Camille to anyone who asked. She's just busy, I'd say. That job takes everything out of her. But the truth is, I gave Camille everything. My business, my time, my health. I bent myself into corners so she'd never have to feel the hunger I once knew. And somehow, in all that bending, I lost sight of who deserved my roots, because while Camille always promised to come back when things calmed down, it was Marissa who kept showing up, right in the middle of the storm. Hospitals have their own kind of silence, clean, metallic, and hollow, the kind that wraps around your bones when you're too weak to fill it with your own voice. The nights were the worst. Machines hissed and beeped in rhythm with my lungs, oxygen, tubes curling around my face like vines that had found their way in. Each breath was a negotiation. My body, tired of being asked to keep going. My spirit, tired of doing it alone. Except, I wasn't alone. Marissa never once asked if she should stay. She just did. She folded her coat over the plastic guest chair, the first night, and didn't touch it again for a week. Every evening, she changed into cozy socks and a zip-up hoodie and slid into the narrow recliner beside my bed. She brought her own pillow from home, lavender-scented. The second night, she walked in holding a tiny diffuser. "This might help you sleep," she said softly, setting it by the window. "It's just eucalyptus and mint, no chemicals." The nurses started noticing her too. "Your daughter's wonderful," one of them smiled, checking my IV. "She's my daughter-in-law," I corrected out of habit. The nurse blinked. "Well, she acts like more than that." I didn't know how to respond. Marissa knew all their names by the third day. Kendra, the night shift nurse who brought extra pudding cups. Robin, the aide who braided my hair when I couldn't lift my arms. Marissa brought them chocolates on Thursday. "Thank you for taking care of my mother-in-law," she said. She never raised her voice, never complained. She read to me when I was too tired to keep my eyes open. Old favorites, Louise Penny, some Willa Cather. She even brought a crossword book and worked through it aloud with me. 4 letters. "Beloved flower shop owner?" She grinned. "Helena," I rasped, smiling for the first time in days. She brushed my hair every night. I hadn't realized how long it had grown, gray streaks curling at the ends, wiry and thin. She untangled it gently, then tied it into a soft braid with a silk ribbon. "There, you look like a queen who's just resting her crown." On the 4th night, Camille's contribution finally arrived. A fruit basket, no note, just a card printed by the delivery service. "Get well soon, Camille." I stared at the perfect apples, the polished pears, the plastic-wrapped cheese wedge that would outlive me. Marissa didn't comment. She just unpacked the basket, washed a handful of grapes, and set them in a bowl beside my water. "At least they're seedless," she said with a small smile. That night, I lay awake long after the lights dimmed. I turned slightly to the right. The glow of Marissa's tablet lit her face. She was reviewing something for work. I watched her, unseen, as she pinched the bridge of her nose, sipped her tea, then glanced at me just to make sure I was still breathing. She did it every 20 minutes. She thought I didn't notice. She was wrong. For the first time, I wondered if Camille had ever watched me sleep like that, or remembered that I liked my tea with a splash of milk, or knew I once dreamed of opening a second flower shop by the coast. It wasn't the distance that hurt. It was the absence. Camille gave me fruit. Marissa gave me her nights, her time, her presence. One brought nothing but a gesture. The other brought me back to life. It was a Sunday afternoon. The air in the hospital room hung thick with antiseptic and the faint hum of daytime television. I was drifting between sleep and memory, caught somewhere between the creak of my old front porch and the beep of my heart. Monitor. Marissa had stepped out to grab tea and a fresh pair of socks from the visitor's lounge. I remember because her slippers squeaked when she walked away, and I smiled to myself at how human that sound was, how real it felt in a world that had gone clinical and cold. Kendra, the younger nurse, came in to check my vitals. Her hair was in 2 messy buns, and she smelled faintly of cinnamon gum. "Hey, Ms. Whitmore, your daughter left a voicemail on the nurse's line. Something about documents?" she said, poking gently at the buttons of the landline phone mounted by the cabinet. Before I could respond, before I could even ask her to wait, she tapped the wrong key. The room filled with Camille's voice. "Hey, this is Camille Whitmore. So if she dies, can someone just handle the will stuff? I can't deal with any of it right now. This is why I told her years ago to get life insurance. But of course, she never listens. Just let me know what needs to be signed. I'm not driving all the way down there." Then silence. Then the automated voice. "Message saved. End of new messages." Kendra froze. Her face flushed. I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean..." I turned my head to the wall. "Could you just give me a moment?" I said. She nodded and left quickly, the door closing with a soft click. That was the moment it all shattered. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't scream or curse or throw anything across the room like they do in movies. I simply wept. Quiet, aching sobs that shook my chest and stole what little breath I had left. Because it wasn't just the words. It was the tone, efficient, cold, like I was a line item on a to-do list. She was already preparing for my death like it was an inconvenience. She had already emotionally buried me. A few minutes passed, maybe 20. I couldn't tell. I was still facing the wall when I felt a gentle weight press down on the side of the bed. Marissa. She didn't say a word. She didn't ask. She just reached over and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, firm, present. I didn't ask her if she heard it. I didn't need to. The tension in the room had shifted. Heaviness made itself at home between us. I stared at the peeling corner of the wallpaper, my voice barely a whisper. She sounded so done with me. Marissa's grip on my hand tightened. "She doesn't know what she's losing," she said quietly. I turned to look at her then. Her eyes were glassy, but not from pity, from fury. Not loud or showy, but deep, controlled. The kind of anger you reserve for someone you once tried to love. "I'm sorry," she added, but she wasn't the one who needed to apologize. That night, when Marissa fell asleep in the recliner again, arms crossed, tablet on her lap, mouth slightly open, I stared at the ceiling and made a promise I never thought I'd make. If I make it out of this room alive, I will not leave my life in the hands of someone who already buried me. That was the moment I made my decision. Not out of revenge, but out of clarity, out of the raw, undeniable truth that I finally let myself feel. Camille may be my daughter, but Marissa is the one who stayed. The sun was out that morning, unusually bright for Astoria, as if the universe was trying too hard to pretend it was a good day. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, legs dangling, my discharge papers in a manila folder on the rolling tray. Beside me, the nurse handed me a pen. "Sign here, Ms. Whitmore. You're officially free." Free. Strange word when your bones still ache and your heart feels heavier than your suitcase. "Is your daughter coming to pick you up?" she asked politely, not realizing how loaded that question had become. "No," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "She's busy." Camille had responded to the discharge update with a 2-word text. "Glad it's over." That was it. No question about transportation, no offer to visit. Just a line, punctuated not with care but relief. Marissa arrived exactly at 9 a.m., just like she said she would. She pushed through the doors with a tote bag over one shoulder and a travel mug in hand. "Good morning," she beamed. "I brought your real cardigan, the one with the pearl buttons. I know you hate this hospital gown." She helped me into my clothes like I was something precious, not weak, just worth the time. Then she crouched down to tie my shoes. My laces had been double knotted neatly, like a mother getting a child ready for their first day back in the world. She wheeled me out, her hand steady on the handle, nodding at every nurse we passed by name. The car was warm when we slid in. She'd thought to park it in the sun. As she buckled my seatbelt gently, she smiled. "I made your favorite tea at home, chamomile with honey, and I stocked the pantry with those cranberry almond crackers you like. Oh, and the soft pears, not the mushy ones. I stared at her for a long moment, not because I was surprised anymore, but because I realized I'd been foolish to ever expect this kind of care from anyone else. Marissa, I said quietly, my voice raw, do you know a good estate lawyer? She blinked, her smile faltering. For now? I nodded. She didn't pry, didn't ask what I was planning. She just placed her hand over mine, resting on the armrest. I do, she said softly. And he's kind. We drove in silence for a few minutes after that. The wind played with the loose strands of her hair as she navigated the turns down Marine Drive. I closed my eyes and let the sunlight warm my face. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt chosen, not because of obligation. Not because of blood, but because someone decided I mattered enough to remember the small things. And that's what finally convinced me. The person who shows up for your recovery is the one who should shape what you leave behind. The lawyer's office was tucked between a bakery and a bookstore on Commercial Street, an old brick building with ivy climbing up the side, like something that had earned the right to stand still in time. I hadn't been inside since Julian passed, back when we first wrote our will. Back when Camille was still calling me twice a week and asking what I wanted for Mother's Day. The air inside smelled faintly of leather and dust. Mr. Adler, my attorney for nearly 20 years, greeted me with a kind smile and a hand on my shoulder. You're sure about this? He asked after I laid it all out. My house, my savings, the old garden tools Julian left behind, even the silver tea set that had belonged to my grandmother. All of it, I said. To Marissa Whitmore, no one else. He didn't flinch, just nodded, professional and measured. I'll file the update today. It'll be official by next week. Back at home, the sky was dimming into that soft Oregon gray. Marissa had just finished replanting the rose bush near the porch. Her hands were covered in soil. She looked radiant, earthy, alive, real. I need to tell you something, I said, my voice steady. She looked up, brushing hair from her face with the back of her wrist. Everything okay? I changed my will, I said. The house, the savings, the garden, all of it. It's yours. She froze. Helena, I'm not doing this out of anger, I said before she could object. I'm doing it out of clarity. Marissa stood, wiping her hands on her jeans. But I didn't do anything for that. I wasn't expecting. I shook my head. You gave me your time, your care, your presence. That's not nothing. That's everything. She sat beside me on the porch step, silent for a long moment. Then she whispered, Are you sure Camille will understand? No, I replied. But I'm done living my life to be understood by people who don't try. The call came 3 days later. Camille. I recognized the ringtone before I saw her name. The same chime I once answered with a smile. Now it rang like an alarm. I didn't pick up. She tried again, then sent a text. Seriously? You're giving her the house? Are you insane? Call me right now. I put the phone face down on the kitchen counter. Marissa was in the garden again, humming to herself as she trimmed the lavender bushes. The air smelled sweet and fresh. It didn't need to be poisoned by entitlement. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed Camille an explanation. She'd made her choice, and now I have made mine. Because legacy isn't about blood. It's about who shows up with open hands and a full heart. It's about who carries your weight when you no longer can, and who would do it again without asking for anything in return. I didn't leave my life behind in anger. I passed it on, to the only one who never treated it like a burden. The sign was simple, hand-painted in soft lavender on a piece of driftwood. The blooming bench, fresh cuts and quiet joy. Our flower stand sat just off the boardwalk in Astoria, near the bluff where the gulls circled and the sea whispered secrets to the shore. Marissa set up crates of dahlias, wild sweet peas, and pale garden roses each morning. I made the bouquets. Not perfect ones. No wire, no foam, just stems and ribbon and instinct. We didn't make much money. That wasn't the point. Every so often, a stranger would stop by and say, "It smells like a memory here." I'd smile and nod. It did for me, too. My joints still ache some days. I moved slower. But I was alive. Really alive. Marissa had taken to journaling on the bench behind the stand when business was slow. Sometimes I caught her sketching little versions of our bouquets. She never said much about it. But one day I saw a doodle in the corner of the page. A tiny version of me, sitting in a sun hat, tying stems with a bow. She drew me how she saw me. Whole. Worthy. Still blooming. Then one afternoon, Camille came. I saw her the moment she stepped out of the car. Heels too high for the boardwalk, sunglasses too big for sincerity. Her presence cracked through the stillness like thunder before a storm. Marissa stood, ready to intercept, but I held up a hand. "No," I said. "Let me." Camille walked up with the air of someone rehearsing a scene she never practiced fully. Her voice was clipped. "Mom, we need to talk." I gestured to the bench behind the stand. She sat stiffly, like it might stain her. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't notice the fresh hydrangeas. She launched straight in. "I don't understand." "What happened? Why would you give her everything? Why you'd—" Her voice wavered, just enough to almost make me pity her. But pity isn't the same as regret. I looked her in the eye, really looked, and said the words I'd been holding. "You made time for my death. She made time for my life." She flinched. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scold or accuse. I simply spoke the truth. The kind that lives deep in the bones of a woman who's done apologizing for being forgotten. Camille stood, without another word. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just walked back to her car and drove off, shrinking into the distance like a chapter I'd finally turned. I returned to the stand, where Marissa handed me a warm cup of tea. We sat together on the garden bench as the wind teased the petals on the table. "I used to think love came with blood," I said quietly. "But blood can clot, and love, when chosen, blooms."